Yeah, I mean, fantastic night last Saturday. Anthony Joshua defending his unified world championships in London. Quite ironic. We were allowed a crowd, 1,000 people. It was absolutely sensational to see people back in the arena. And the government just announced about an hour ago they're going to close all that down. So as of Wednesday, there'll be no more crowds. So it affects some of our other sports, but we were lucky enough to at least get 1,000 people in for a great night on Saturday. Great performance from Anthony Joshua, dispatching of Kubrat Pulev, a very tough Kubrat Pulev in 9 rounds. And obviously, we all hope that we can get the unification, undisputed fight ASAP with Tyson Fury. We will continue to work on that. And of course, this week, we have a huge night of boxing as the legendary champion just joins us in the Zoom. Gennadiy Golovkin will make his record-breaking 21st defense of his middleweight world championship against Szeremeta at the Hard Rock in Florida, live on DAZN globally. As we know, it's a fantastic opportunity for him to make history, the mandatory defense of his IBF world title. And a big card as well. Great fight on the card. I don't know if you guys, sometimes when you have a superstar headline and you don't take too much notice of the undercard, one to look out for particularly, Ali Akhmedov against Gongora. Great fight for the IBO Super Middleweight Championship of the World. Hun-Min Choi, our WBA Super Featherweight Women's World Champion, will also defend her title on the card. Reshat Mati on the card. England's John Ryder just had a great fight with Callum Smith for the Super Middleweight Championship of the World. And that's all before we head to Texas, of course, for the Canelo Alvarez against Callum Smith fight on Saturday. So another incredible weekend of boxing on DAZN. Before Triple G joins us, I'm happy to answer any questions as we get ready for another huge week.
Okay, great. Donna with the first question, please.
Hey, Eddie, how's it going?
Good, mate. Very good.
I just want a quick one for this. This isn't my main question, but it's coming up to the morning time when people will be waking up on the West Coast in America. Have you had any calls from Las Vegas regarding what happened?
I had one last night. I had a brief one last night. There's been a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks. I didn't want to do too much because, one, I hate putting a jinx on it, and two, I want AJ's attention, you know, when we're going through the details of the deal. And obviously now he can focus on that. You know, had a good chat with Bob last night, and we're all of exactly the same mission, to get this fight made as soon as possible. We are starting now to look at the contracts, draft the contracts. There's not really a lot to agree, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously we know the split is already agreed. Really, we've got to look at where it's going to take place and iron out a few contractual issues on the TV partners. And I think we're there. I'm very confident we're going to get it made.
I wanted to ask you, though, about Scott Coker, who you've spoken to about potentially having Katie Taylor fight Chris Cyborg. He told me this week that he is also interested in putting on the Dylan Dennison Jake Paul fight. Are you interested in perhaps promoting that?
No, I'm going to take a little bit of a sabbatical from the YouTube stuff. I kicked the ball off last year, and now everyone's trying to do it. I actually said to Floyd on Saturday night, he was at the AJ fight, I said, you need to be careful. This is a very, very tough fight you have with Logan Paul. And he asked me, you serious? I said, no, I'm not. So, you know, I think Jake Paul's okay. You know, Jake Paul's a good fight. I think the one I would be interested in is Jake Paul against KSI, but we'll see.
Hey Eddie, Jonathan here from Pro Boxing Fans.
Right.
What's your understanding of the situation with the WBO? Have you had any conversations with the president about what's going to happen with this USIT mandatory?
Yeah, I spoke to Paco Valcazar actually about an hour ago. Get on very well with Paco. They're in a difficult position because obviously they're desperate to be a part of this fight, but they also have an obligation to Alexander Usyk that he is mandatory. So in an ideal world for the WBO, he would, you know, in some way, Usyk needs to be happy with the resolution and the situation. So, but at the same time, you know, I said that if there was no belts on the line in this fight, it would still take place, and it would still be the biggest fight in boxing. So, you know, it's a tough one for Paco because he really wants to be a part of it, but you can't just ignore people's mandatory obligations at the same time. So myself, Bob, Alex Krasuk, Egis Klimas, you know, all the parties involved, Alexander Usyk, will have to come up with some kind of solution that would keep him happy or vacate the belt.
Thank you. JR Bell next, please.
Hello there, Eddie. Just talking about our last conversation before the Jacobs fight, where we were talking about the events that you were putting up. I had to just ask this question. How relieved would you be after December 20th, after all of the events that you put up this year are done?
Well, I think the answer is very relieved, but it's really because of the close that we've had. You know, we've had so many fights, so many great fights, so many, I mean, there's been a couple of average fights thrown in there as well. You can't predict what's going to happen in the ring, but the finish to the year is always very important. And so is the start to the year. And I feel like we've not finished as strong as this in any year I've been promoting boxing, you know, with AJ against Pulev, with Gennadiy against Szeremeta, and then Canelo against Smith. You know, in the middle of a pandemic, it really is, you know, a tribute to the work of Matchroom and the team that we have on both sides of the Atlantic, and also our broadcast partners as well. You know, DAZN, I love the fact that, you know, what was it, probably 4 months ago, all these guys sitting at home, you know, these hardcore fans that want to talk about the demise of DAZN. Apparently they're going out of business, they're pulling out of boxing, you know, and then they launch a global product and actually are more aggressive than they've ever been, you know, have a better schedule to close the year than they've ever had before. And I really feel that, obviously, you know, I'm a big advocate of DAZN in the US, but when you look at the schedule that you're providing, you know, you've just had 3 back-to-back pay-per-views really over 3 months. You know, you had Charlo, you had Gervonta against Santa Cruz, and you had Spence against Garcia. You're talking about $230, right, for those 3 nights. You're about to have Anthony Joshua, Gennadiy Golovkin, and Canelo Alvarez across 1 week. You know, and for $99.99, you get an entire year on DAZN, and the value for the global customer now is unbelievable. So we're really happy with how we're closing the year. We're really happy how, you know, how well we've worked in the environment. It's been very, very difficult, very challenging, but also very rewarding. And of course, you know, there's so much more drama to come this weekend. Gennadiy is in his record-breaking defense. Now he has a tough, undefeated challenger in Szeremeta. And of course, the day after is Canelo against Callum Smith. And obviously, everybody's looking towards the 2 winners of those fights. I'm a little bit biased because obviously Callum Smith's my guy. But I know from a DAZN perspective, the reason they're putting these 2 together, you know, on the same weekend is to build to that 3rd mega fight.
Thank you. Hans next, please.
Hey Eddie, how you doing, man?
Good, Hans.
So yeah, I just want to ask you straight up, man. Do you believe that Triple G is still the best 160-pounder in the world, or do you kind of have somebody like a Jamal Charlo? I guess you could throw Canelo in there. But yeah, do you still have Triple G as the #1 in the world, or is it kind of a toss-up? And like, who do you have?
I kind of think that we're, you know, boxing fans, of which I'm one of them. We're very dismissive, aren't we, after even anything that's not a grade A performance, and, you know, we start questioning people. I mean, Gennadiy Golovkin had 2 tremendous fights with Canelo Alvarez, you know, 2 fights that a lot of people thought that he won. Some people thought that Canelo won, you know, some people thought it was a draw, but unquestionably, they were tremendous fights. You know, he came back with a relatively straightforward fight against Steve Jobs. Not Steve Jobs, there's the guy from
Steve Rose. Steve Rose.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't want to fight Steve Jobs. I mean, that'd be expensive. You know, and against Steve Rose. And from there, you know, he had what can only be described again as a tremendous fight with Derevenchenko. And it was only because the Derevenchenko fight was close that people start questioning now, okay, you know, is Gennadiy at the latter end of his career? I think no. You know, I think he was going through a little bit of a transitional period with Jonathan Banks as well. I do expect him to put in a destructive display against Szeremeta. I believe he's going to win the fight by knockout. And I think he's extremely motivated to go on and fight anybody. I mean, you know, the pleasure of working with Gennadiy Golovkin is he'll never turn his back down at an opportunity or a challenge. And I think when you look at the division at the moment, you know how highly I think of Demetrius Andrade. You know, he needs that standout fight. Charlo is a great champion as well. And then you've got Gennadiy Golovkin. You know, you've got other guys in the mix as well, Jaime Munguia. But I think that with Gennadiy, and I will say this as well, you know, I know that he's laser focused on this weekend. And when he does join us, he don't want to talk about Canelo Alvarez, you know, and I want to try and avoid those questions if possible, because the same as Anthony Joshua last week, of course, I will tell you, in my opinion, the ultimate challenge that he wants to accept next, I believe, is Canelo Alvarez, but he's just focused on Szeremeta. I believe his resume, you know, stands as the best middleweight in the world right now. And by the way, he will fight Charlo, he will fight Munguia, and he will fight Andrade. If the Canelo Alvarez fight doesn't present itself. But a lot has got to happen this weekend for that to be the case. But, you know, pound for pound, you have to say, I think he's still the most exciting fighter on the planet.
Okay, just want to quickly follow that up. That's a great answer, and I know he does have the best resume at 160 pounds. But you know, it's kind of like when people talk about Pacquiao. Pacquiao has the best resume at 147 pounds, but they don't really consider him the best. But do you believe that he's the best at 160 pounds? I don't really want to twist your arm or nothing like that, you know. But
yes, I would say with everything that he's achieved, with his resume, with his performances, I would have to say yes. You know, again, you know how highly I rate Demetrius Andrade. And not for no fault of Demetrius is he hasn't been able to get the standout marquee names on his resume to maybe say that I am on paper the #1 middleweight in the world. So, you know, whilst he may be, you have to say that with everything Gennadi's achieved, with everything he's shown, and the ability that I still think he has, yes, you have to put him as the #1 160-pounder in the world.
And just my last thing for you, you said if he doesn't get the Canelo fight, you will fight Charlo, Andrade, stuff like that. But, you know, a lot of people believe that he probably will get the Canelo fight, most likely anyways, don't really know. But, you know, win or lose, if he does get that fight, he typically fights twice a year. Let's say he fights Canelo, he beats him, loses, whatever. Is the angle still going to be to fight either Charlo or Andrade? Because that is, you know, that's the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Canelo Alvarez, if he beats Callum Smith, you don't know where the weight division lays. I don't personally see Canelo Alvarez coming back to 160. So, you know, would Triple G move to 168 to fight him? I mean, there's so many questions to answer. All I can tell you, honestly, is that, you know, there's a list of fighters that I know he wants to fight. And, you know, they do include all the names that you've suggested, but he's got to get through Friday night first. And then, you know, for me, I'm hoping for a Callum Smith victory. If that doesn't happen, you know that every broadcaster that would be working with them, and certainly DAZN and the fans, would push for #3 first. And then what happens after that, we'll have to wait and see.